Ja, zwei Stück. So, und Stefan ist auch da, sicher, das ist die Frau.
do it. So it's interesting, when you feel this. That was the feeling I got already in the first round. No, don't do it now. And then this parrot is good. Yeah, you look good. What is it? I should make a photo of this because I told my daughter, get me some new black shoe.
Let's do it.
Wait. Okay.
Good morning, everybody here in the room, and good morning and welcome, everybody, or to all of you joining us via live stream digitally. We are very happy to have you all here, either physically or virtually, because this is a wonderful moment for us to celebrate this wonderful show. Let me start with a few sort of remarks about how this exhibition came about. So I believe it must have been about 10 years ago, so quite some time ago, that Jerry Gorowoy, the head of the Louise Bourgeois estate, mentioned to me that Jenny Holzer actually had an idea to curate a show with mainly drawings by Louise Bourgeois. That was a kind of a wonderful idea. And then I was then still at the Menil collection in Houston. We did invite Jenny Holzer to curate a show. She came, and then this was must have been around 2014, and then Basel called, and I left Houston, which I thought, well, unfortunately, that was the end of the project, but it wasn't, because the Menil did not follow up, and then we, of course, did here in Basel, and then Anita came into the project and started to work with Jenny, and I'm just extremely happy, really, Jenny, that you and Anita developed this project, which I believe is very unique. So maybe just one more thought or observation about the program of the Kunstmuseum Basel. This is a powerful moment. Jenny Holzer meets Louise Bourgeois, but I think we've had similar encounters last year, or at least I see this show as a kind of a continuation of a program that we have tried to do. Last year we had Sophie Teuber-Arp, which you have seen, an under-recognized, very important artist who has now had her international coming out in a way. Then we had Anita curated this powerful, together with Cara Walker, the show, which was very contemporary, powerful, political. We also had Tacitadine last year, so I just want to mention that this is not just a coincidence. We want to work with artists who also have the talent to curate, and I think we have a fantastic example with Jenny Holzer here today. I do believe that we as museum workers and curators can learn a lot from artists, and I think this is another example. So I just want to say what a great honor it is to have you here, Jenny, and I cannot be grateful enough for what you have generated for this museum. I think it's outstanding because there have been many, many shows about Louise Bourgeois. Obviously, this is the third in my life that I have been able to be associated with. The first one was in 1991 in Bern, and then one in my first job in the US in 2003, and this is the third one, and it's a totally new vision and view, and so I think this is really great. Now, I want to also thank Anita and Anita Haldemann, who is the head of the Kupferstichkabinett, which you all know, a world-renowned collection of works on paper, and also, of course, the co-curator in-house on this show. I want to thank you for all the work you've done with the team, and the team has been big, and it's been complex, as we will hear. And I also need and want to thank the Easton Foundation, Jerry Gorowoy, who is the president of the Easton Foundation. He's not here, but he's in the house somewhere. And of course, Philip Larrett Smith, who is here, there in the back, and will be here, who is also has worked with Jenny and representing the Bourgeois estate and the Easton Foundation. And we're most grateful to the Easton Foundation and all the sponsors who have supported this show. And with that, I want to pass it on to you, Anita, and then we'll soon start with talking with Jenny.
Thank you. Well, as Josef already expressed, the Kunstmuseum Basel is very proud to present this extraordinary and unprecedented exhibition which Jenny Holzer has curated for us with enormous engagement, with intelligence and precision. No art historian or curator could have brought to the task Jenny Holzer's absolutely unique perspective and deep understanding of Louise Bourgeois' work. We are grateful for the privilege of collaborating with you, Jenny, and cannot thank you enough for the generosity with which you devoted time and passion to this project. Thanks to the close collaboration with the also already mentioned Easton Foundation in New York, which administers Bourgeois' legacy, Jenny Holzer was able to choose a splendid selection of works. She makes masterful use of our exhibition spaces in a very unique way. This is truly not just a regular and large exhibition. It is a multifaceted installation with 9 very individually designed galleries. The subtitle, "The Violence of Handwriting Across a Page," is the key to this project. Jenny Holzer and Louise Bourgeois share the use of language in their artistic practice. They share the awareness of power, the straightforwardness of addressing painful issues, and also a certain sense of humor. This affinity has enabled Jenny Holzer to interpret Bourgeois' work in a subtly sensitive way. She thus offers a highly original perspective on her oeuvre. In fact, this is the first exhibition that concentrates this intensely on the connection between Bourgeois' writing and her other activities. Bourgeois wrote extensively throughout her life. Her writings include diary entries, loose sheets, the majority of which were made during her psychoanalysis, small agendas, notebooks, lists, and the backs of many drawings. This written output, parallel to her artistic output, is highly significant. The stream of consciousness approach Bourgeois often took when writing is echoed by the immediacy and spontaneity felt in her lines. Throughout her life, Bourgeois combined writing and drawing, wrote across her drawings, or even made drawings out of words. Bourgeois' writings had an important function in her creative process. Like her artworks, they gave expression to and sometimes alleviated her traumas. The act of writing allowed her to consciously express what were sometimes unconscious emotions and impulses. In her work, Bourgeois used the written word in many forms, embroidered on textiles such as underpants and handkerchiefs, stamped into lead plaques, inscribed on prints, and included in certain of her cell installations, among others. In many later works, Bourgeois mined earlier texts from her diaries and writings, conflating not only images and the written word, but also past and present. While the exhibition itself is exclusively the stage for Bourgeois, Jenny Holzer introduces a highly innovative and creative augmented reality app in order to offer an immersive, multisensory experience. She created and developed this AR app in collaboration with Holzer, a London-based creative innovation studio. And I think despite all the hard work, it was a lot of fun to develop that. The app focuses on Bourgeois' pivotal installation called The Destruction of the Father, made in 1974. The app will also allow users to see Bourgeois' words floating around them wherever they go and to create and share their own AR images. Jenny Holzer's perspective on Bourgeois' art unfolds in the special artist's book, which you have seen on the table. It was created for this exhibition and published with JRP Editions. Working with this sumptuous, oversized format, Jenny Holzer has set up juxtapositions between works and writings by Bourgeois and has enriched this dialogue with her choice of paintings, drawings, and prints from the holdings of the Kunstmuseum. In characteristic fashion, Jenny Holzer has moved beyond the walls of the exhibition space of the Neubau and engaged with the rest of the museum. The passageway connecting the Neubau and the Hauptbau is occupied by Bourgeois' rarely seen twosome, created in 1991. This monumental mechanical installation is very atypical for Bourgeois, and no wonder it was chosen by Jenny Holzer. It resembles a railroad tank car and moves back and forth on track. It embodies the dynamic oscillations between male and female, attraction and repulsion, union, separation, and also mother and child. Twosome creates an ideal transition for the visitors from the new to the Hauptbau, where Holzer has placed 4 sculptures and a drawing by Bourgeois in dialogue with masterworks from the museum's collection. Hans Holbein's Dead Christ in the Tomb has a new neighbor in one of her impressive arched figures. Niklaus Manuel's Pyramus and Thisbe, as well as Paul Cézanne's Bathers and Ferdinand Hodler's depictions of women, are now face to face with powerful sculptures by Bourgeois. But that is still not all there is to be seen. There is more to discover. In vicinity of the dialogues, we present a selection of prints and drawings in our graphic cabinets, which are reproduced in the artist book. We are very happy about the fact that Jenny established a strong and inspiring relation between Bourgeois' oeuvre that spans 70 years of art history with our rich collection, as did Cara Walker last year in a very different fashion. On the way to the exhibition, I might suggest you take the elevator this time in the Hauptbau and the Neubau and be surprised by or be accompanied by Bourgeois' voice singing, rapping, or speaking. Another intriguing idea our guest curator had. So you see, this is not just one exhibition. Jenny Holzer took the notion of the carte blanche that we offered her very seriously and developed a project with many facets. However, as outstanding as the exhibition itself is, there are projections that are at least as outstanding as the project I already presented. There are projections on 3 sites in the city of Basel, which she created specifically for this moment. One of them can be seen on the facade of the Kunstmuseum and the courtyard, and the other 2 buildings with projections are the town hall and the old university next to the Rhine. And maybe you've already seen them or saw them last night when they premiered. By choosing excerpts from texts by Louise Bourgeois, Jenny Holzer is taking her written word beyond the museum walls into public space, and we believe that Bourgeois truly deserves to occupy the public arena, at least for a while. I've been talking for a long time now, but I'm sure, ladies and gentlemen, you want to hear Jenny Holzer speak in her own language, and therefore Josef and I will now pose a few questions before you will have the chance to also ask a few things. So, Josef, do you want to start?
Well, maybe it's a simple thing, but do you remember when you met for the first time, Louise, and what your emotions, reactions were?
It was a few thousand years ago that we met, so I can't vouch for the veracity of my answer, but what I am certain of, we met in the 80s. I was invited to her house, and I had the luxury of spending an extended period of time with her, where I could look at, for example, a red wax ear of what appeared to be a demon sitting on the table beside us, and to have an extended, unself-conscious, absolutely sincere conversation about how to make the color blue work. When you're an artist, you can feel a little silly talking to a civilian about how necessary it is to have your color work, but with Louise, it was natural and edifying.
So in a way, from the very beginning, you seem to have talked very precisely about your practice as an artist. Huh?
It's one thing I knew that we should share. No sense talking about the weather when granted an audience.
So I tried to explain a little bit what this exhibition looks like or what it is about, but maybe you can explain how you came up with the structure that is absolutely not chronological. How did you develop this?
The structure was developed over any number of years of fretting over how to make it good enough. Bourgeois sets a high standard, so I was at moments terrified of doing something not commensurate with her practice. We went to a number of approaches so that hopefully in each gallery there's something very different. In some galleries it's quiet and largely dedicated to a single series, a single theme, sublimation, for example. I do recommend sublimation for most people. In other rooms, we tried to reflect what I would see when I would go to her house, which was an enormous wealth of projects started, projects abandoned, a bookshelf full of what one really should read and understand. So some galleries are utterly full to the ceilings. It's good you have high ceilings.
Maybe that indicates that I think you've already kind of imagine or guess from what Jenny just said that this is in many ways an unconventional show, also for our guards, because things are not always under these kind of cases. There's lots of small objects. You can get very close as a visitor, and we hope you will all respect that and not do things that we hope nobody will do. So, but I think that's part of the immediacy of it. I mean, you mentioned it right at the beginning, this unbelievable intensity from the very first moment when one meets Louise Bourgeois. I met her for the first time in 1989, later than you, but it was extremely touching, this kind of sincerity, but also the tenacity with which she continually worked, and even when she thought and talked, there was no disruption in a way in her flow in her creative flow. I always felt. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, please don't steal anything in the exhibition, however tempting. I can support you there. Yes, one of the best things about speaking with her or looking at her work was that, as they say in Brooklyn, she was not plain. Although she did have a wonderful sense of humor and a sense of adventure, but she was utterly serious, dead serious about what she attempted, and she would try again and again to get it right. unlike many artists, she often did arrive there. In the exhibition, we tried to represent that with showing a number of series, showing a number of different representations of certain themes. She would go back and back and back very hard, and I admired and still admire that enormously.
So how did you select the works? Because Bourgeois' work is so vast and so diverse, and I think it's really hard to, because every piece you choose means you have to leave others out. So how did you do that?
Ultimately, I don't think we left anything out. But, the process of choosing happened a few ways. One was my remembering the pieces I've loved that I saw over time. Femme Maison, I saw at the Guggenheim years ago, and I adored it. So we were tremendously lucky to be able to have it here. Other times, as you'd mentioned, we were fed by the Easton Foundation and the Bourgeois group at large wonderful options from which to pick. We asked for what in some cases hadn't been seen frequently. We wanted to offer what hasn't been shown much. We went deep into the writing. She worked incessantly on her art, and she wrote when she couldn't sleep. So we had a treasure trove. So you will see more writing than can be absorbed in one visit. Please come back. And more art than any one human ever should have been able to make. And then our concentration was how to hang it so that, again, there would be a difference from room to room, and so the hanging itself might invite increased concentration other than, oh, I hope I get out of here soon.
Anita mentioned Twosome, which is a stunning piece, a kind of it's a shocking piece in many ways, a very powerful piece. I hope you will see it. It's not something that has been shown in Europe much, maybe not, I don't know, ever. But it's a powerful piece, and Anita has already said a few things about it. How did you choose, or does it have to do with this transition between two buildings that you choose this piece, or can you say something about it?
I was intrigued by the passageway, and I thought that needed more than decorating. So how fortunate to have access to this utterly terrifying, dirty piece that is a bit funny too, just a little bit. And there's a bit of voyeurism. You can look in its windows, and it makes noises, and it has lights. What's not to adore? And yes, it does, in its back and forth motion, link the buildings and link the parts of the exhibition, because we have exhibition proper in the new zone, and then we have what I hope are some engaging or at least surprising juxtapositions in the old territory.
Yeah, you spent a lot of time walking through our collection the last couple of years, or before the pandemic at least, and to find out where you want to have the dialogues. What was your main interest in the dialogues?
First, and you're right, it was years ago, I made a number of trips, and I would go around and around the galleries with the glorious antiques, and I would note and save paintings that caught me somehow, that they were especially good, especially wild, or the subject matter was terrible or wonderful. So we had a list of those, and then I began to think what of Louise's might want to have a chat. So we began with that. And I confess I wanted to see her sing with or do battle with what was there. So I think she sings well, as you will hear in the elevator and the bathroom.
You mentioned Femme Maison from the Guggenheim, which is in the beautiful Cézanne space, I believe. So obviously you're a great intellectual. You know exactly what you're doing. Can you say a little bit more about that decision, that juxtaposition, this kind of combination?
I will sound like a visual person first. That's what I hope I am. I liked the whites in the room. I liked Cézanne's whites, and Louise's slightly grayed marble was perfect with the lady flesh in there. And it is a woman's house, so I thought, for example, the juxtaposition of her masterpiece, this marble sculpture, and the bathers was interesting both formally and also how different it was for Louise to construct this house and for Cézanne to look at and imagine all those naked ladies. So I thought there was a lot there.
It's a highlight. I hope that will intrigue you to go and visit. That it's a beautiful space always, and now with this, it's a rediscovery also of the work of Cézanne. And I thought that's very nice to hear that the whites in Cézanne were actually a reason for you. Maybe you should also ask about.
Yes, we have another question regarding the importance of Bourgeois, not only to you as an artist, but for women artists your generation.
She was and is enormously important because she did as well or better than any artist could, and I'm willing to say in most any time. So what's not to like?
You spent many, many hours reading her texts or going through her archive. Did you discover aspects that were new to you, or was it confirming what you thought about her work and the way she ticked?
Her writing was so voluminous that it took a team of us to go through it, and we didn't make it all the way through. I had a professor at Columbia reading. We had an entire posse to do it. I think what we found confirmed what I knew. She was enormously intelligent. She was distressed. She was determined. She had incredible range. She was obsessive. She was furious. She would have a giggle from time to time. She was, I'll resort to the word infinite again, she was infinite.
Mm-hmm. So it was not easy to select the excerpts that you used for the projections, I assume.
It was excruciating because, like with a lot of the paintings and sculptures, I just like it, I want it.
Okay.
It's something that's probably not easy to talk about, but of course it's a fascinating question, and you alluded to it, this kind of openness also of hers, to anybody. I mean, when I met her first, I thought I'm a nobody, and how could I meet this famous woman? And of course that was not at all what she conveyed to you. She took everyone. Took you very seriously, and one immediately had, as you said, this absolutely, depending on which state I was, beautiful conversation, really about deep issues, and never any sort of totally uncensored with herself. So when you did this. She was in her late 70s, or she was in her 70s in the 80s when you met her. She had just had her first show, in a way, in the 82, I believe, she had her MoMA show, which was the first time she was even taken seriously, in a way. And so this kind of purity almost that she had, I never thought Louise Bourgeois is an artist who would waste a thought about career and about the art world. Just nothing whatsoever. That was not what she was interested in. And was that something that was also kind of a, something that one had to admire for you as a young artist, or is it?
I greatly admired that she didn't waste time. She didn't trifle, she was immediate. She was right there. She would talk about what was important. She would, at times, be fierce. She was a little frightening to be around because she was highly intelligent and impatient properly. But there was also some vulnerability present, and given that it was twice as remarkable that she endured and was able to offer all of us what she has.
So should we offer questions to the
audience? Well, maybe this is maybe something this generosity in a way, and I think I hope you've seen Jenny Holzer has made some beautiful statements that we have given to you, and I think you mentioned it, and she was, and you just said it now, she was giving and giving more and answering and giving more, and there was never this kind of, so this is maybe also a very unique kind of quality that she had. And one can see this endless repetition in a way also, and going back to what she was concerned with, and in a way unwillingness to make any compromise. I think those are things that are characteristics, I would say, for great art. But I don't know how you feel about this.
She didn't surrender.
Yeah, that's a beautiful summary. Yeah.
So I think we would like our guests to pose some questions.
Where does your idea of being a curator about Louise Bourgeois come from?
I have no idea of being a curator, but I was invited to work on this. I like to work. I adore Bourgeois, so I could ignore that I'm not a curator and be a fond, crazed fan, eager to offer people what I have loved and learned from.
But did you have the idea of doing a show with another artist?
I did once invited. Before I was just another crazed fan, just an amateur crazed fan.
Hi, you said you knew her personally. You said her art was very immediate and vulnerable. I was wondering if it for you, who met her and knew her, has it never felt intrusive to go through all her private writings and journals like that?
I wouldn't and couldn't have while she was alive, now that you mention it. I also, when she was alive, didn't hang around too much, not only because I'm backward, but out of respect for her privacy and her need to work. Now, I hope what we did was justified, but go upstairs and look and tell me if it stinks.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm so happy to meet you. You have no idea. So, being totally inspired by your words just now about being daring and uncensored. You just made a couple of minutes ago a hint about this chatting, with the chat between her works and the museum's collection. So, if this is that serious, no pun intended, do you channel her? Have you felt so much in contact with her that maybe you felt you were channeling her? Are you in touch with her? Thank you.
I would love to have a seance, and that's sincere. Yeah, if you know any psychics, let's do it.
From your own artistic development, we know that you have been very open towards collaborations. For example, in the early 80s with the collabs with Lady Pink and so on. So with hindsight, would you say it could have been a desire from you to collaborate with Louise as well?
I hate to admit to being afraid, but I think I would have been afraid. Her intellect would make me scamper off. It's good we've done this at a bit of a distance. But yes, I adore collaboration. I greatly benefit from it. I couldn't do a small percentage of what my studio and my friends put out without any number of people. Yeah, I'll end with fear again.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. One more?
Is this exhibition going on to another museum, or it has been designed just for here, and or can it be transformed to another place?
I don't think any other institution would be brave enough to tolerate what they have. It would be different someplace else if it ever were to be. I don't believe it's going anywhere. This was made for this place, in this city, in this time.
It's true. I think we wouldn't be against discussing how, if this project would go to another place, but then that would be a new discussion with Jenny, because this was really very carefully done for this institution with all these overlappings and things that go and have to go together. So, yeah.
Could do it with 2 dead artists next time.
Yeah. So, but you should maybe catch the moment. It's not so often that you can ask questions. So please do. We do have a few more moments. There's one.
Did you put the light on the political, let's say, aspect of the work of Louise Bourgeois, or not at all?
It's implicit in a number of the works. Her thinking and doing as a female and a feminist is there. We don't have that as a major explicit focus, but I think it's hard to miss. For example, in some of the short fragments selected for the projection, you hear her roar.
Good. Any other wish to express or ask a question? If not, let me finish by mentioning, not finish, but by going to the next chapter here. We will have obviously programs related to this project, and you can find those in your press kit here. We will have a lecture by Bryony Fair and also a performance and many other things. So please look at these informations in this map here. Then now you are invited to visit the exhibition. So we hope you will take advantage of it. I really want to thank you for your interest in this project, which is so important and dear to us. I think it's an important moment, I believe, for this institution, but also for all of us. This has been very, very, very enriching and very, very, very touching also. I also want to thank those who have joined us digitally. they please stay on, because there is a visit, a digital visit with Anita through the exhibition. So even if you're not here physically, you should stay on. We will put that on live stream, and that's, I believe, it. Have I forgotten anything? No. There's another question.
We have at the same time at Bayonne, Georgia O'Keeffe, another feminist.
Mm-hmm.
And what is this kind of resonance for you at the same time?
When I was relatively young, O'Keeffe was one of the few women artists I knew about. And so she loomed large. There weren't many around in the 50s, at least in consciousness. So I looked at her, I was enlivened by her, and my grandmother looked exactly like her. So, yeah.
And you said several times that you were afraid of Louise. Could you explain?
I was made properly cautious by her brilliance.
But she could be aggressive, one could see in some videos.
I heard that was the case. I never saw it, and I'm glad I didn't.
Thank you.
Yep.
I feel strongly there's just an enormous respect from Jenny Holzer towards Louise Bourgeois, and it would have been strange if one wouldn't have great respect for her. I've never experienced any kind of aggression seeing her, but of course she has talked a lot about it and has written a lot about it, and that it's in her work. I mean, and her work is not separable from life. I think that's what makes her an extraordinary artist. And how could we speak seriously about art and life without aggression? We all know that our world is full of it, but in a way.
We know that she was welcoming a lot of people every Sunday, if I remember well. And sometimes when she was bored, she was quite.
Yeah, she did mention murder from time to time.
Okay, so let's finish this part, please. It's in the second floor here, new building, but then also please go visit the Hauptbau with these spaces and also transition not through outside but through inside. Thank you very much.
Welcome to the Kunstmuseum Basel. I am Anita Haldemann. I'm the head of the Department of Prints and Drawings and Deputy Director of the Kunstmuseum Basel. And I have the pleasure to show you this exhibition, this very exceptional exhibition, while we're still installing during the last day before the opening. The exhibition, Louise Bourgeois Cross Jenny Holzer, is a very exceptional project that I'm very proud to present you. We invited Jenny Holzer to curate a show on Louise Bourgeois, and this is exceptional because Jenny Holzer is an artist curating this exhibition. So you will be surprised how our second floor galleries look this time. Louise Bourgeois and Jenny Holzer are two giants of American art, we could say. They're very influential, have been very influential and important for contemporary art. Louise Bourgeois was born in Paris, died in New York at the age of almost 100 in 2010. And Jenny Holzer is 40 years younger, and they knew each other. And so this exhibition is also a little bit an homage to the older artist. But at the same time, this is an exhibition that very much focuses on the written word and writing. And that makes so much sense because Jenny Holzer is known for a kind of art, conceptual art, that focuses on language, its importance in public space. And for Louise Bourgeois, writing was also at the center and core of her life even and her art. There's a huge archive in New York with lots of writings and diaries, letters, and so that's the starting point for this exhibition, and it plays a role in every gallery. We start here in the first gallery, which is exceptional, or each gallery is exceptional in its own way, because Jenny Holzer made kind of installations in each room. So in this first gallery, we have these beautiful shelves with very wonderful and also surprising objects by Bourgeois, and they're juxtaposed with prints from the late 40s. And that already shows you that Louise Bourgeois, from the beginning, really liked to combine writing and drawing, or writing and printing. And these prints were made at a very important point in her life, because in 1938 she had gone to New York, left Paris, and to live in New York with Robert Goldwater and her 3 sons. And in the 40s, she started to find her own identity as an artist. She shifted from a focus on painting to sculpture, and you can see the sculptural aspect in these prints. They show kind of abstract architecture, skyscrapers, and then they're juxtaposed with these beautiful objects that show how important material became for Louise Bourgeois, that it was the 3-dimensional work that was the medium where she was able to really practice an emotional, psychological release that was so important for her. Her art is very much emotionally and psychologically charged. She deals with very basic and intense emotions like love and sexuality, with suicide, with passion and jealousy. So with kind of the basic experience also of life. And when she came to New York, what was important, not only the shift to sculpture, which we see, for instance, in this beautiful object from the later 40s, but also a very personal character of her work, because this is a portrait of her son, Jean-Louis, and who was a small boy at this time. And Louise Bourgeois was so impressed by the skyscrapers in New York, and she said that she wanted her boys to become as strong and tall and confident as the skyscrapers in New York. And at the same time, there's already this very close relationship between architecture and the human body that will become even more important during her lifetime. So the body, especially the female body, will be at the center of her work as being almost like a building. For instance, the mother who houses or protects the baby in her belly. So that's one aspect of it. So I think we'll go to the second gallery, which is also will be surprising, I believe. And again, it's like an installation. Jenny Holzer was able, as an artist especially, compared to a museum curator, to really install the works the way she felt would really help the drawings to have all its power and effect on the visitors. And I think it makes it so lively that you have to look up and see this kind of frieze on top with these beautiful watercolor works. And then you look down, you have earlier drawings, and here you have a 3-dimensional piece in the center of the gallery. And I think that gives you a sense of the corporeality of Bourgeois' work and how important material was for her. This is a piece of wood that she found the way it looks, but then of course sculpted the top like a flower, and there's a marble figure on top of it. And that's a very typical way how she combined found objects with her own creative expression by fusing the two. The frieze you see on top, these long watercolors, they deal with the river, the aspect of water. And rivers were very important for Louise Bourgeois because she grew up next to one near Paris, but also because the river is a metaphor for the life that, the time that runs, that flows, memories that flow, but the future that's ahead. So it's in a way very positive. It's connected to memories of childhood. And at the same time, the river can be something menacing. It can be dark and deep. It's the place where, it has to be with depression, for instance. So it's a very rich and dense metaphor. And I think that's an aspect that comes through in this exhibition, that there are so many layers to Louise Bourgeois' work. There's a lot of ambivalence and many different aspects to grasp when you study her work. So we will go to the third gallery. And here you get a sense of the materials Louise Bourgeois used. I mean, drawing and writing was always very important, but very early on in her career, she was very innovative regarding sculpture, or the notion of sculpture, and she started using fabrics and tapestry, and especially material that was already used. Like here you have fragments of tapestry she used to make a tower of cushions in a way, and tapestry has to do with childhood again, and her parents who had a studio to conserve and repair tapestries. So that has to do with childhood and memories, and of course what she lived through as a child with a very complicated family history and a very also difficult relationship with her father. So it's, as you see, very, very sensual when she uses these materials. They're also very charged in terms of memory and also painful memories that she had and tried to kind of control by making sculptures about them. And at the same time, she kind of replaced paper with fabric. She printed on fabric, she stitched and sewed on fabric. And again, here you have a wonderful examples of writing on fabric, and especially this very small piece, The Return of the Repressed, kind of a motto for this gallery, that whatever memories or traumatic experiences you try to forget or cover up, they always come back. And Louise Bourgeois was so courageous to always deal with what came up, and she did not try to repress what bothered her and what still affected her later in her life. And she didn't only use soft materials that you would connect with everyday life, especially fabrics that she used in her everyday life, like dresses that she had worn herself or family members had worn, but she also uses metal, lead, and steel to make plaques. And here I think we have of course, very obvious relationship also to the work of Jenny Holzer, who is known for the statements she not only printed on paper, but also had on plaques and benches and LEDs in public space. We move on to the next gallery that is very dense with a lot of drawings and also textile works and writings. But in the center, I would like to point out this wonderful sculpture, and that I think shows very well how innovative Louise Bourgeois was in terms of understanding sculpture in a new way. It's the Broom Woman, and like the femme maison, the woman in the house, it has to do with the role of the woman artist who's caught in between expectations of her as a woman, a mother, a wife, and an artist, and all this, the kind of challenge to play all these roles at once and stay true to herself. I think for a long time Louise Bourgeois was not well known as an artist, and nevertheless she was very consequent in doing her work, and at the same time raising a family, and never lost track of her own, what she wanted to do as an artist, but ended up thematizing these questions in sculptures like these, where the broom, of course, relates to housework and the home, the family home, and address to femininity and the whole fragility of her as a woman and an artist. And then, of course, here you see all these fears and anxieties, but sometimes also affirmations of her own desires and wishes. For instance, here on this handkerchief, you have the words, "I have been to hell and back, and let me tell you, it was wonderful." So she has these really strong emotions and ideas that are expressed in these works, but there's often a really special sense of humor, often black humor, that also comes through. We have here wonderful drawings that are like notes or sketches where she writes down ideas, and that's an interesting aspect of her work, that drawing and writing often mingles, and it's very close to each other. Drawing becomes like a diary and is combined with writing. So the two are really, really close. And also the aspect of ambivalency that I mentioned, that there are so many layers to Louise Bourgeois' work, often are expressed in these notes she writes on sheets like maybe or maybe not. Just a small drawing on blue paper, but these really short statements often express so much of her art and what it is about. And of course, what is important is not only the psychology in general of her art, but in 1951, after Louise Bourgeois' father died, with whom, as I said, she had a really complicated relationship, she started a psychoanalysis. And not only was she in an analysis, but read a lot of these psychoanalytic texts, and as she was very well read and well educated, and there are a lot of writings that relate to that aspect that was so important for her later work. And here on this big piece, she writes about these anxieties. She writes, "I'm afraid of silence, of the dark, to fall down, of insomnia, of emptiness." So she was very reflective and very much asked herself or analyzed her own experience and identity, never afraid of facing any the most frightful thoughts she had. This gallery is very central to the exhibition because we show an installation by Louise Bourgeois called "The Destruction of the Father" from 1974. And it's not only a key piece in Bourgeois' work, whole oeuvre even, but it is central because Jenny Holzer developed an augmented reality app for this piece. That means visitor will download an app and they will then scan this drawing of a fillette called a little girl. Of course, a very ambivalent drawing as well. It's not only the portrait of a girl or a female body, but all at the same time, of course, of the male sexual organs. So visitors will scan this drawing, and that will release a very unusual and new experience of the destruction of the father, which you see in the background. And while Jenny Holzer wanted her work not to be part of the exhibition and only be present outside the museum in Basel, it's this augmented reality app that is really a piece of art by Jenny Holzer to augment and enrich the experience of this installation, which, as I said, deals with the destruction of the father, and that's a theme in Bourgeois' work that's very central. It's based on this difficult relationship with the father and the fantasies of revenge of the family at the dinner table, eating up the father, destructing him, and kind of also fight the fears from this dominant father. So this is one version of this theme. It's kind of a big installation that should allow visitors to kind of understand those intense feelings Bourgeois had vis-à-vis her own father. So this is something that's very special for this exhibition, because this AR app that Jenny Holzer developed with a firm named Holzer in London is very, very innovative and will be a big surprise for everyone. And of course, we have soft sculptures hanging here in the room as well, that are typical for Bourgeois' work, that again have to do with this new idea of sculpture and this this feeling of hanging in the air, of being helpless, and also a bit of a victim. It's a very unstable situation, of course, and that's an important part of this kind of sculpture. In this gallery, we show a long series of works on paper that are very typical for the way Bourgeois combines writing and drawing. It's a very late work, when she was already in her early 90s, and I'm always impressed how creative and active she was still at this age. And the whole work, which comes from the Centre Pompidou and hasn't been shown in quite a while, is called Extreme Tension. And the words Bourgeois wrote on the paper first describe her body. She starts with the scalp, the forehead, the ears, and she goes through the whole body, down the back, the neck, the shoulder blades, all the way to the solar plexus. And then she enters the body, and you see other shapes coming up on the drawing. Here it's the stomach and the throat, and so you see that it's a view into the body, basically. And then she goes on to describe more body parts, and in the end it's also about pains and cramps. So it's about feeling the body, about bodily processes, and also very uncomfortable aspects like palpitations and hot flashes, and in the end extreme tension again. And it seems this whole work is very much about Bourgeois and aging, of course, and feeling her old body, and also this probably also fear of dying and the body becoming too weak, or maybe the memories that she might lose, she's afraid of losing. So it's a very very intimate work, again, as most works, of course, by Bourgeois are, but very, very personal. And the very last sheet reads, "The smell of the hunted animal." And of course the hunted animal is Bourgeois herself, and it's a feeling that she never lost even in old age, that there's these fears still present, and this anxiety that she's thematizing in her works of art. I'd like to go to the next gallery, which is actually still very much in progress. It's the last room we're installing today, but you can still get an impression. This gallery is very much about the experience she had in the 40s when she came to New York and had to leave her father and family and friends back in Paris. And in New York, of course, she missed them so much that she made these sculptures, which are called Personage, and you can see they look like representatives of people, of bodies that are missing. And again, if you imagine they were made in the late 40s, that's a very innovative kind of sculpture she made. And they're here being combined with drawings that deal with separation. For instance, this beautiful drawing with scissors and kind of different kind of tools that have to do with cutting. And it's also always cutting of the umbilical cord, the separation from the child. That's like the basic and first separation you have as a human being, because of course you're always bound to your mother, but at the same time you're cut off at some point. So it's again this ambivalence of feelings, of union, separation that is very important throughout the exhibition and the work of Louise Bourgeois. And the next gallery is devoted to writing again. And first, I think what you see when you come in here is this whole wall full of writings, facsimiles actually, from the archive of Louise Bourgeois. And Jenny Holzer took a long time to read many, many writings in the archive and chose a particular set of them to create this wall. And that again relates, of course, to the way Jenny Holzer presented her own writings in exhibitions and in public space. And it allows you to read a couple of sentences, at least, and get a sense of how important and fascinating the writings by Bourgeois are. They're here combined with prints on fabric called the Book of Hours, and it has to do with a long tradition of books that were made for people to pray every hour, but now, of course, Bourgeois changed it to the course of time, course of her own time, and she deals with time and getting old, of course, and time that keeps going on and can't be stopped. And it's on musical paper. That's always something that reappears in her work once in a while. So writing remains important also in the next gallery. This is again a work of the older artist, and it's a series that's conceived like double pages from a book she could have made. And these drawings and the text tell a story about a boy who witnesses his parents fighting, and he puts together the remains of the fight. And in the end, it's about sublimation, a central aspect of Bourgeois' work, because she often described that out of all these bad memories from childhood, or the conflicts and the pain she observed or experienced herself, she made something beautiful out of. So she created art, and in the end she made something beautiful of something that was not so nice in her life. And she often said that art kind of rescued her, because art helped her to release her fears and at the same time control them by making art of them. And here again we have a beautiful juxtaposition with two sculptures, especially this one called Cœur, hearts. It's about two hearts. They're lit from inside, which will be seen better when we dim the lights later on. But it's always beautiful to see how drawings and text in the end are transformed into sculptures as well, and give another kind of and a three-dimensional expression to what Bourgeois tells us in her writings and drawings. So now we enter the last gallery, which is really a big and intense finale with almost 200 works in one big gallery. And I think, again, you get a sense of the installation Jenny Holzer designed for this big space. And here you see mainly drawings or watercolors and gouaches from the last decade when Bourgeois was working, when she was in her 90s. And it's very much about the relationship between the mother and her child. It's about breastfeeding. So the breasts are very present in red. They're like little landscapes. You have the mother and son relationship, but also you have, again, the tools to cut, make the cut and free yourself, which can, of course, also be painful. Then you have more abstract sheets as well with spirals and rays. So that's also typical for Bourgeois' work, that she often goes close to abstraction, but then always comes back to the body that's central. We have two sculptures in this gallery that relate beautifully to the color red. The colors were really important for Bourgeois. Red was, of course, very central because red is the color of passion, of love, of sexuality, of course, but also of blood and pain, and so a really loaded color. And this is one of the cells she started making in the 90s, a so-called soft sculpture in the center, also a grown-up, an adult head with two smaller heads united in one body. In this very, very heavy cell. So it's also, again, about mother and children. So that's, I think, something that really was important to her at the end of her life. This memories of the mother-child relationship, but also about family. There's also a whole beautiful series about the woman's body being the protective space for children, and then the male figure next to it. So that's kind of sums it all up, what was so important for her work. And again, here, of course, you don't only have the red color, but you have writing. You have the pencil writing across these bodies. It says the miracle, it says eternity and pity, but there's, again, the whole ambivalence of it's not only the unity and harmony of family, but it's the tension, and it's there's a lot going on, let's say it like this. So this is the last room, and that is the end of the exhibition here on the second floor of the Neubau of the Kunstmuseum. Jenny Holzer went beyond the exhibition to also place Bourgeois' work in the rest of the Kunstmuseum. For instance, she placed a very unusual work called Twosome, made in 1991, in the passage between the two buildings of the Kunstmuseum. It's a big tank wagon that moves back and forth, kind of two pieces merging and coming apart again. And that's an ideal work to show in between the two buildings. And it's a sculpture or even an installation that thematizes again this theme of the being united, being a twosome, but at the same time wanting to separate and coming back together. So it's not only about the relationship between men and women, but also between the mother and the child. So this is a really surprising and rarely seen work by Bourgeois. Holzer also is curating dialogues in the old building of the Kunstmuseum. She placed 4 sculptures in galleries of the first floor amidst the old masterworks by Holbein and also works by Cézanne and Hodler. And she starts really interesting dialogues between Bourgeois' work and the history of art, between art by male painters and the sculpture of Louise Bourgeois. So you will not only discover Bourgeois' work in the midst of our collection, but you will start to look at our old master paintings in a new way, I believe. You will also be surprised in the elevators, where you will hear the sound of Louise Bourgeois singing or reciting. And there's a small exhibition on the first floor of the Hauptbau in the graphic cabinets. That's where we are showing drawings and prints from the collection of the Department of Prints and Drawings that Jenny Holzer chose to reproduce in the artist book that she made. It's a very unusual and impressive artist book that Jenny Holzer designed for this exhibition, mainly showing, of course, works by Louise Bourgeois, but in between you will always find some drawings and paintings from the Basel collection. Jenny Holzer produced one big work, or rather 3, by developing projections on facades in the city. There's projections on the Kunstmuseum Basel itself in the courtyard and the outer facade, and the city hall, as well as the old university near the Rhine. And for this time, Jenny Holzer chose text by Louise Bourgeois to project. So she brings Louise Bourgeois' very intimate and personal thoughts and writings into the public space. And that's a very unusual work by Jenny Holzer.